My name is Emily Jacobs, and I'm 17 years old. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, sharing a story about meeting Jesus and receiving a vision about the dangers of our time, I wouldn't have believed you. Honestly, I probably would have laughed it off or changed the subject. But everything changed for me on a cold December night in 2022. That night, my life was turned upside down in a way I never saw coming. And I realized that what I thought I knew about the world was only a fraction of the truth. Before I share what happened, I want to speak directly to every parent, grandparent, and young person watching this. Please, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. This isn't just my story, it's a message for all of us, for our generation, and for the times we're living in. You see, I didn't believe in near-death experiences or visions of the afterlife. They felt too extraordinary, too distant from the reality I lived in. But when I found myself standing in the presence of Jesus, everything I thought I knew about life, death, and faith changed forever. What I'm about to share isn't easy to talk about, but it's something I can't keep to myself. My goal isn't to scare anyone, but to wake people up to a very real danger, one that's hiding in plain sight. Technology, which so many of us use every day, isn't just a tool or a distraction. It's becoming something much darker. I've seen firsthand how it's being used as a weapon to deceive, to distract, and to spiritually disconnect us from God. And the scariest part? It's happening so subtly that most of us don't even realize it. So please stay with me as I tell my story. I believe it's a warning we all need to hear. It was a Friday night, and honestly, it felt just like any other. I had settled into my usual spot on the couch in our living room, scrolling through my phone. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, it was the same cycle I fell into every evening. One video would lead to another, and then another. Before I knew it, hours had gone by. The house was quiet by then. My parents had gone to bed, and my siblings were in their rooms. The only light in the room came from the glow of my phone screen, casting faint shadows on the walls. I didn't think anything of it at the time. This was my normal. As I scrolled, I started to feel off. At first, it was just a little dizziness, like I had been staring at my screen too long. But then it got worse. The room began to feel like it was spinning, and I couldn't shake this strange, heavy feeling in my chest. I thought maybe I just needed water, or maybe my blood sugar was low. I didn't know. I decided to get up and head to the kitchen, but as I tried to stand, the dizziness overwhelmed me. My legs felt like they weren't mine, like they couldn't hold me up. And then, just like that, everything went black. In that moment, I didn't feel scared. I didn't even have time to process what was happening. 1 second, I was there in my living room, and the next, I wasn't. The next thing I knew, I wasn't in my body anymore. I found myself floating above the couch, staring down at what looked like me. My body was slumped against the cushions, lifeless, with my phone still glowing in my hand. That faint blue light illuminated the room, casting long, eerie shadows that only made the scene feel more surreal. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind raced. Was this some kind of dream? Was I imagining it? But the more I stared, the more real it all became. Panic began to set in. I tried to cry out, to call for help, but no sound came out. I felt trapped, unable to move or make sense of what was happening. A sinking realization crept over me. Was I dead? The thought sent waves of confusion and fear through me. I didn't understand how something so normal, so routine, could lead to this. But just as the fear threatened to overwhelm me, something incredible happened. A blinding light filled the room, cutting through the darkness like the dawn after a long, cold night. This wasn't just any light. It was alive. It pulsed with warmth, love, and power, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And then I saw him, Jesus. He was standing in the center of the light, radiant and powerful. His presence was so real, so overwhelming that it left me completely undone. This wasn't the Jesus I'd seen in Sunday school pictures or imagined in my mind. This was the living Jesus, his very being radiating love, compassion, and authority. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was stand there, awestruck, as his presence filled every corner of the room and every part of me. Then, he extended his hand toward me. "Come," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight and authority that left no room for doubt or hesitation. It was calm yet commanding, filled with a love that felt like it was calling me home. Without question, I reached out and took his hand. The moment our hands touched, the room around me disappeared. The couch, my lifeless body, the glowing phone, it all faded into nothingness. And just like that, I was somewhere entirely different. When the light faded, I found myself in a strange and eerie place. It was a void, not dark, but not bright either. The air was thick, and the silence felt heavy, almost oppressive. At first, I thought I was alone, but then I began to notice them. Screens. They were everywhere, hovering in midair all around me. Phones, tablets, computers, TVs, and even VR headsets floated like they had minds of their own. Each one glowed with an unsettling light, casting flickering shadows that danced across the void. These weren't just objects, they weren't lifeless or neutral. I could feel something radiating from them, an energy that was heavy, oppressive, and almost alive. It was as if the screens were exerting control over the space itself, creating an atmosphere that felt wrong. I turned to Jesus, who stood beside me, his presence cutting through the oppressive energy like a shield. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and urgency and said, "These are the tools being used to distract, manipulate, and enslave humanity." His words hit me like a shockwave. "These devices," he continued, "were created to connect people, but they are being twisted into something far more dangerous. They are conditioning the world to become dependent, to crave instant gratification, and to ignore what truly matters." I looked back at the screens, and suddenly I could see more clearly. They weren't just glowing, they were pulsating, emitting a hypnotic rhythm that seemed designed to trap anyone who looked at them. Then, the vision shifted. I saw people, thousands of them, standing in the void. At first, they appeared like shadows, but as the light from the screens illuminated them, I saw their faces. Each person was chained. The chains weren't made of metal, they were made of light, but not the warm, living light I had felt earlier. This light was cold, artificial, and suffocating. It bound their hands and feet, connecting them to the glowing screens hovering in front of them. Their faces were illuminated by the screens, their expressions vacant and lifeless. They were scrolling endlessly, tapping, swiping, and staring, completely detached from everything around them. It was heartbreaking. "These people don't realize what's happening to them," Jesus said. "They believe they are in control, but they are not. They are chained by their addiction, blinded by the glow of what they think will bring them happiness or escape." I felt tears streaming down my face as I watched. The screens weren't just distractions, they were prisons, trapping people in isolation and pulling them further and further away from the truth. "They are being prepared," Jesus said. "Conditioned for something much greater, much darker. This is not just about distraction, it is about control." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. I realized that what I was seeing wasn't just a warning, it was a wake-up call. As I stood there, surrounded by the glowing screens and the haunting vision of people chained to their devices, Jesus spoke again, his voice steady and filled with purpose. "This addiction to technology," he said, "is not accidental. It is part of a larger plan, a preparation for what is to come." I turned to him, feeling the weight of his words pressing on my soul. "The world is being conditioned," he continued. "Dependency on these devices is being normalized so that when the next step comes, most will not question it. They will welcome it." Then the vision shifted. I saw a world not too far from now. It looked familiar, yet different. People walked through bustling cities, their heads bowed, their eyes fixed on screens. But it wasn't just phones anymore. They wore devices, embedded seamlessly into their daily lives. Watches, glasses, even microchips beneath their skin. At first glance, everything seemed convenient and efficient. Transactions were instant, identification was automatic, and communication was effortless. But beneath the surface, something far more sinister was happening. Jesus revealed that this progression of technology was paving the way for the mark of the beast. "What you see," Jesus said, "is how it will be offered, not as something evil, but as something beneficial. It will promise convenience, security, and belonging. It will seem to solve problems and make life easier, but it will come at a cost many will not understand until it is too late." I watched as people lined up willingly to receive the mark. It wasn't forced. They accepted it with smiles, eager for the promises it offered. The mark didn't look evil. It wasn't a brand or a symbol that screamed danger. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, a small implant, a digital identifier that allowed access to everything from money to healthcare to basic necessities. But Jesus showed me the truth behind it. Accepting the mark wasn't just a physical act, it was a spiritual decision. By taking it, people were aligning themselves with forces of darkness, rejecting God without even realizing it. Jesus then revealed the greatest danger of all: deception. "People will not recognize the mark for what it is," he said. "They will be lulled into complacency by the comforts and promises of technology. They will not question its purpose, nor will they see its spiritual implications, and by the time they realize what they have done, it will be too late." I saw people losing their connection to God, their hearts growing cold and distant. They didn't realize they were being separated from Him, pulled further into a system designed to control, isolate, and ultimately destroy their souls. The vision was devastating, but Jesus' presence remained steady, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. "This is why you must share what you have seen," he said, turning to me. "The world must be warned. They must open their eyes to the dangers around them and prepare their hearts, for the time is near, and the choices they make now will determine their future." His words resonated deeply within me. I understood that this wasn't just about technology. It was about the heart, the soul, and the choices we make every day. As the vision unfolded, Jesus turned my attention to the next generation, my generation. He showed me how millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha were uniquely vulnerable in ways that hadn't been seen before. "These generations," he said, "have grown up surrounded by technology. For them, it is not a tool, it is a way of life." I saw scenes of young people scrolling through endless feeds, their faces illuminated by the glow of their screens. There was a heaviness in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on them. They didn't seem to notice it, but I could feel it. The isolation, the emptiness. Jesus explained that social media, entertainment platforms, and apps weren't just harmless distractions. "These tools," he said, "are being used to isolate individuals, distort their values, and erode their awareness of me." I saw how perfectly these platforms were designed to capture attention, to make people crave likes, followers, and validation. It wasn't just about keeping people entertained, it was about keeping them distracted. "They are being trained," Jesus said, "to seek approval from the world instead of seeking me." The more time they spent on these platforms, the further they drifted from God, their hearts becoming harder and their minds less aware of His presence. Then Jesus showed me another vision. This time, it wasn't just about the young people, it was about their families. I saw parents, overwhelmed and busy, handing devices to their children to keep them entertained. I saw kids glued to tablets at dinner tables, their eyes fixed on screens instead of their families. "These children," Jesus said, "are being shaped by what they consume, and if no one steps in to guide them, they will continue down a path that leads away from me." His voice carried a deep sorrow as he spoke. Parents and guardians must wake up to the dangers surrounding their children. They must be the ones to set boundaries, to teach their families how to prioritize spiritual health over digital distraction. I saw families praying together, setting aside time to connect with God and one another. These families weren't perfect, but they were intentional. They created space for faith, for conversation, and for love. Jesus emphasized that this isn't just a suggestion, it's a necessity. The enemy seeks to divide families, to sow chaos and disconnection, but those who stand firm in faith, who guide their children with love and wisdom, will shine as lights in the darkness. As the vision faded, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. Parents, guardians, mentors, you have the power to protect your children, to lead them back to the truth. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Jesus' words were clear. Teach them to see me in their lives, to hear my voice above the noise of the world. For the choices they make now will shape their eternity. Amidst the heaviness of what I had seen, the chains of addiction, the spiritual battles, and the vulnerabilities of my generation, Jesus gave me a vision of hope. He showed me the power of prayer. In this vision, I saw believers scattered across the world, their heads bowed, their hands lifted, their hearts fully focused on God. As they prayed, something extraordinary happened. Beams of light shot up from where they stood, piercing through the thick darkness that surrounded the earth. These rays of light were not weak or wavering, they were powerful, cutting through the oppressive shadows like swords of truth. Jesus explained, every prayer, no matter how small it seems, carries immense power. When believers come together in prayer, their voices reach heaven and push back the darkness. The prayers didn't just stay where they were sent. They traveled, joining with the prayers of others. Together, they formed a network of light that spread across the globe, pushing back the spiritual oppression caused by technology and deception. Then the vision shifted, and I saw individuals who had been chained to their screens, people who had been trapped in addiction, distraction, and hopelessness. As they began to pray, the chains that bound them started to break. One by one, they stood up, their faces no longer illuminated by the glow of screens but by the light of God's presence. Jesus explained that through faith, humanity could resist these deceptions. It is through me, he said, that the chains are broken. By turning back to God, people can reclaim their spiritual connection and find the peace they are searching for. I watched as these individuals found freedom, not just from technology, but from the emptiness and isolation it had caused. Their hearts were no longer focused on the fleeting distractions of the world, but on the eternal love and truth of God. Jesus emphasized that this wasn't a battle meant to be fought alone. When believers unite in faith and prayer, their light grows stronger, he said. Together they can overcome the forces of darkness and bring hope to a lost and weary world. This vision gave me a renewed sense of purpose and hope. No matter how overwhelming the darkness seemed, it could never overcome the light of God. Prayer isn't just a personal act. It's a force that unites us, strengthens us, and connects us directly to the Creator. As I stood there, watching the light spread across the world, I realized something profound. We are not powerless. With faith, with prayer, and with unity, we can push back the darkness and reclaim the connection we were created to have with God. As I stood there, overwhelmed by everything I had seen, Jesus turned to me with a look of love and urgency. "You cannot stay," he said gently, but his voice carried a weight that left no room for question. He explained that what I had witnessed wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. "You have been chosen to see these things," he said, "so that you may warn others, tell them of the dangers, show them the truth, help them prepare, for the time is near." I felt the gravity of his words settle deep in my heart. This wasn't just a vision. It was a mission, a calling, a responsibility to share what I had seen and help others find their way back to God before it was too late. The next thing I knew, the light began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the couch in my living room. My body felt weak, as if I had just come through something physically exhausting, but my spirit was alive in a way it had never been before. I knew in that moment that my life could never go back to the way it was. What I had experienced wasn't just for me, it was meant to be shared. The urgency of Jesus' message echoed in my mind, and I felt an undeniable responsibility to spread the truth about the spiritual dangers we face and the hope we have in Him. If this story has touched your heart, please don't ignore the message. Take a moment to reflect on your own life and the role technology plays in it. Are you distracted? Are you distant from God? Now is the time to break free from the chains and turn your heart back to Him. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hit the notification bell to hear more life-changing testimonies like this. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. It might just change their life. Together we can spread the light, push back the darkness, and prepare for what's to come. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you on your journey of faith.